Hey guys, it's Abby from, oh god, I almost knocked the pad over. Hey guys, it's Abby from Abby of Pellinor, and today I am going to be going through my February reads. I managed a shit ton this month, and I don't know how. Let's get into it. So, the very first book that I read, consisting of 25 pages and with one of my hairs stuck on it, is Frictions by August Strindberg. This is a teeny weeny Swedish classic. It wasn't my favourite one. It was about a husband and a wife who end up having the husband having an affair and leaving the wife, having a divorce, in times when this was not acceptable. I'm assuming like the 1800s just from how it's written. Yes, he was born in 1849 and died in 1912, so probably 1800s. Nice little book, not my favourite. I think I gave it 3 stars, but it was nice. Then next up with 275 pages is Gone by Michael Grant. So if you've been watching my channel, you know that I read this in January and got to like, I don't know, 275 pages away from the end and didn't manage to complete it in time. So this is the first book that I finished off. This is a middle grade dystopian where all of the adults one day just anyone over 15, and anyone who then hits their 15th birthday also goes. And this book kind of looks at how children would manage being the only people left alive, how different factions would break out, how responsible or not they would be, and it's really, really interesting. It's a really fun book. I will say that there are some issues with it. It's very of its time. There's like fat phobia in there, really bad autism rep, things like that. But because I grew up with that sort of literature, because this was released when I was at the right age range for it, I just didn't read it at the time. So because I grew up with that sort of stuff, I can read past that, because I'm used to having to do it. If you can, it's a really fun book, and I'm going to continue in the series. I've got Hunger on my shelves, the next book. But just be aware that that is something that's wrong with the book. Then I read Deliverance of the Blessed, or Deliverance of the Blessed, I'm not sure, by A.V. Endacott. I need to ask her. So this is the latest book in the God-Kissed Continent, written by Alice, and I adore these books so much. Alice gave me an electronic copy of this free so that I could read it and review it, but you also know that I love this series. Like, it's one of my absolute favourite series ever. I love it. This one we follow first country, second country, third country, fourth country. This book is the first book that we've had for the first country, and we follow people who have magical powers bestowed on them by the gods in this country. That's a theme that runs throughout the books. However, in this country it's not seen as a good thing, and they're actually kind of like ushered away into this school to learn to control themselves and subdue their powers until they won't use them at all in the real world, and then they're sent back out there. It's amazing. I loved it. The ending. How is this a standalone? How is this a standalone? Alice! It's really good. This is a fantastic book, a fantastic series. I loved it so much, and you best believe I'm gonna be getting a physical copy. Just maybe not right now because I think my parents might kill me. But I will be getting a physical copy of this. And that came in at 233 pages. Then at 317 pages I read Delegates by... I always forget this author's name. It's on the cover. So this is a graphic novel that is the second in a little duology so far. The first one was Sheets, which I read back in 2018 and I found really cute and really adorable. This one, also very cute, also very adorable, but I didn't quite like it as much as Sheets. So the premise of Sheets is that this girl, her mother has recently passed away, and she runs a laundromat with her dad, and she's had to take on a lot of the responsibility, and suddenly the sheets come to life. And it's like a little cute ghost story. This obviously follows on from that, but the messages that it gives are different to the ones in the first book. However, the ones in the first book felt appropriate and well done and inserted with meaning, and in this one it's very much like, oi, be a good person, and it's like, yeah, I know, It's not meant to be this obvious. Like, it was, they wrote out word for word, like, you shouldn't do this. It's like, I mean, it is aimed at younger YA, middle grade, so for that audience it probably works fine, but just be aware if you are older. Going into it, it is going to kind of shove the morals in your face rather than building a nuanced story around them, but still enjoyable. The next thing I finished was 66 pages, which was my section this time of Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. I am reading this bit by bit, just going through little sections just so that I keep momentum with the book. I'll mention this a bit more later, but it actually co-aligned and matched up with another book I was reading, which I didn't expect. It's very interesting. I'm really enjoying it. It's a big book, but it's very, very interesting. Oh, that's handy. So, the next book, which comes in at 288 pages, is the one I wanted to mention, and that is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. So this is a memoir of stories from a South African childhood. Trevor Noah is a comedian who has gotten quite big in the US, but he comes from South Africa, and this is his life growing up there. As you can see, I enjoyed it. The orange ones are laughing, the purple ones are like where I learnt something, the yellow ones are just where I was like, sticking out, and the blue ones were sad ones. So, quite a few. The reason I wanted to link this with Long Walk to Freedom is because I'm so early on in this book, I didn't expect these to line up at all. Like, Trevor Noah's pretty young, he's what, like, mid-30s? Nelson Mandela has unfortunately passed away, and we are only this far into the book, so I wasn't expecting anything to match up. And I am very bad at like looking at dates of things, and especially because the way that this is organised, it doesn't like have the date at the top of the page or anything. So they mentioned a black city was like, nope, bye, and they razed everything to the ground and built homes for white people on it. And so that happened within the section of this that I read. And in this, but like halfway through, and I just hadn't been expecting it, like at all. And on top of that, I read the chapter, so I was reading like one chapter of this a day, and I read that chapter where this kind of eviction happened, and I was like, alright, cool, time to read my normal book. And then it happened in this one. Was not expecting at all, but it was really cool to kind of have them line up. Very interesting. Anyway, this is a fantastic book. Trevor Noah, if you don't know, is half black, half white. His dad was Sweden. He was Sweden. He was the entirety of Sweden. No, I think he was Swiss, but he may have been a Swede. And his mother is black South African. And so at the time, that was illegal. You weren't allowed to have sexual relations between the races. Hence, Born a Crime. And it's just very, very interesting to see kind of how he was brought up, how he had to be kind of hidden in a way, and then also the way that he was able to kind of insert himself into lots of different groups without actually being able to be a part of any of the groups. Of course, it's funny. Of course, it's sad, it's interesting. I learned a lot about apartheid that I wouldn't have known otherwise. I mean, possibly, obviously, through reading this, but like this was a look into how it impacted kids and young people, and it was very, very interesting. I really do recommend this, it's a fantastic read. Then coming in at 219 pages is 5 Orange Pips and Other Cases by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, some Sherlock Holmes stories. This collection is actually bigger than that in total, it's like 330 pages, but I didn't read all of the stories in it because I have actually read The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes in a binder before, and this has the adventures, the return, and the memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, different stories from it. So I skipped the ones that I had already read. Recently, I read them, I think, either beginning of this year, end of last year, but I read all of the other ones. I adore Sherlock. If you don't know, it's 1800s detective who uses obvious cues and obvious clues that the usual person would overlook. But very good, loved it, sped through it. I love things like this and things like Poirot. I read through them very, very quickly, but I always tend to give them 4 stars. I don't know. Either way, I loved it. Next up, an absolutely fantastic non-fiction. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. So this is about HeLa cells, which you may have heard of if you studied science in school up to any particular level of depth. HeLa cells are the ones that we used for everything. They are immortal, and they were taken from Henrietta without consent, and Henrietta was a black woman in the US, I think in the 50s. So you can tell why this is an interesting story. Her family, unfortunately, has spent their life in poverty, the same as Henrietta did, for a variety of reasons, but not helped by the fact that they didn't get any of the profits that have been gained from utilising HeLa cells. This was a really, really interesting read, and a lot faster to get through than you would think, given the fact that it's 400 pages and a non-fiction science book. It actually focuses a lot on both the science and the family. Rebecca Skloot is a white journalist who went to contact the family to write this full book about it, and with, as far as I can tell, the family's permission, she included how difficult it was to get in contact with them, because they didn't want to speak to white people anymore, because they kept coming in, getting these stories about Henrietta and then buggering off and making their money. They didn't want to have Henrietta's memory be manipulated for more white gain, and so it was a long process for them to trust her. And I really like that this was included. If you watched my January TBR, I mentioned in that I wasn't sure about the fact that it was a white woman writing this, about a black woman's history, but she addresses that herself. Obviously, that doesn't make up for every single inherent subconscious bias that she may have, but she's done a damn good job at trying her best. She's done everything that she could just to kind of nullify her subconscious bias, and that is massively appreciated. It means that we get to learn about all the scientific sides of things, but also learn about the family, about kind of how Henrietta's life progressed, so a bit of a biography about her, as well as a little bit of a biography about her children, about the rest of her family, and kind of how they are now, how they're living. It's an incredibly interesting book, and the fact that she really humanises Henrietta and her family is so important when these HeLa cells have been anonymised and depersonalised and used for so much good in the world, but without thinking of her or her family. So this was fantastic, and it came in at 448 pages. Next up, at 298 pages, is Waistcoats and Weaponry by Gail Carriger. This is the third book in the Finishing School series, so of course I won't go into too much depth, but I will say it is steampunk, it's Victorian, they are in a finishing school, but it's for spies, and there are werewolves and vampires. It's fantastic. I love the characters, they're so much fun, it's so stupid in the best way. I love how the plot is developing, and I cried at the end of this book. I'm so glad that I was forced into it by Zoe from Zoe's All Booked. You bitch. But I love it. Next up, at approximately 145 pages, is Forest 404, which was written by Timothy X. Atack. I say approximately 145 because it's an audiobook and it doesn't actually come in a written format, it's actually a podcast. So I did some research, it comes out at approximately 145 pages, just for my calculations. There's two bad things, I'll get them out of the way. One, it's a podcast, I got this from NetGalley, and they said it was just an audiobook. It's not, it's a podcast, be aware of that going in. Secondly, you can't speed this up, you have to play it at standard 1x speed. But it's fucking fantastic! It's amazing! So, I have to describe this. Let me put it this way, I've already written my blog post review and it's 1,500 words. How to summarise this? It is a story set in the 24th century. We're following a woman who is exposed to, I think it's pictures of forests. Obviously it's an audio format, so we just hear the sounds. I think she's exposed to pictures. Either way, we get the sounds, and they get stuck in her head, and we're told straight up somehow she causes the downfall of society, and we don't know how. and it progresses on and tells you how. This is it's sci-fi, it's thriller, it's environmental. I adore all of the voice acting. We have Pearl Mackie, we have Pippa Haywood, and we have Tanya Moody. 3 of them are fantastic. They do an amazing job. Not only do they have the story episodes, there's 9 story episodes, but then there's also 9 accompanying pod talks and soundscapes that link to each episode. The pod talks speak with an academic looking at something around this issue, so whether that's how we're moving more online and being very online at the moment, or whether that is looking at the environment and the sounds of the environment. And then the soundscapes are just beautiful soundscapes of the world. Most of them are natural, so like rainforests or the British countryside, but there is one specific example of non-natural, which is just the sounds of St. Petersburg. It's amazing. It's fantastic. The acting done is brilliant. I also feel like I should mention that out of the 3 women who are the only people who are voice actors in this, 2 of them are black women, which love, because they were the perfect fit. I don't know who else you could have cast for this, and I would have been mad if it hadn't been these 3. It's absolutely fantastic, absolutely amazing. Like, in terms of time, it's like 5 hours 45, I think, roughly. Trust me, guys. Trust me, please. It could be on my favourites of 2021 list. It's fucking amazing. Please, please. Yes, I got it off of NetGalley, but I can't actually get the NetGalley app on my phone. I've got an iPhone 6. It's too old, can't get it. I just listened to it for free as a podcast using the Apple podcast service. I'm sure you can do the same on Android. You can download it on the BBC website and you can listen on bbc.co.uk. Guys, it's amazing, please. I need someone to nerd out about for this. It's fantastic. It's so good. Next up is Touch is Really Strange by Steve Hains. This was 35 pages long and it was fine. I've read Forgiveness and something else that I can't remember, but I've read 2 other books in kind of like this series and they're interesting. I did like the beginning half of this. It's got like some scientific facts where you can just read them, but if you want the footnotes that explain in more detail, you can read those. The graphics are really pretty. What I wasn't so keen on was the fact that at the end it's got like these exercises to do with people where you have to like touch them, and it mentions the panini in the actual like main part of the novel and then says to do these touch exercises. Like, do they know how many people are living alone right now? Like, I don't live alone. I live with my parents. Would they do this with? No. No. They'd be like, what the fuck is no? So it was just like, the only people I could do it with would be friends who I can't touch. So I gave this like 2 stars just because it really pissed me off. Like, don't acknowledge it and then ignore it. Next up, coming in at 92 pages, I read The Dawn Chorus by Samantha Shannon. This is a novella, kind of 3.5 in the Bone Season series. I have The Mask Falling. I'm going to read The Mask Falling. I felt like I should catch up first. This is a really good bridge in between the 2 books as far as I can tell. Obviously I've not read the 4th one, but it does kind of take on from where the 3rd one ended and move towards what I'm expecting in the 4th one. So it's a really good bridge. Bone Season series is very difficult to describe because it crosses multiple genres, but I will say fantasy, sci-fi, dystopian, mixed with magic. It's not YA, it's adult. So, just FYI. But yes, I adore this series so much. Very glad I read this. Obvious 5 stars. Then, coming in at 230 pages, I finally read Samuel Nowak by Caitlyn J. Bolton, otherwise known as Mad Cheshire Rabbit, here on BookTube. So I'll leave her link down below. As you guys know, I'm friends with Caitlyn, so of course I was going to read this. This is a book about a young man kind of growing up through and into the First World War. I will say that just because obviously I'd only read the synopsis, which says like, through hard times in the Great War, I just kind of assumed the whole thing would be. It's not. The war bit doesn't really happen until there. This is just like a historical fiction about his life. I really enjoyed this. I'm not going to give it a rating, I'm not going to go into too much depth, because you guys know how biased I am. Like, ridiculously biased. It's Caitlyn's book. So there's no point in me doing that, but I do say that if you do like historical fictions and if you do like reading about World War I, I would give this one a go and pick it up. I found it really, really interesting. I'm sorry for not giving like a rave review, Caitlyn, but like, they wouldn't believe me. Then, coming in at 101 pages is Apocalypse Kings by Skulduggery. Every time I say this I sing. Why? This is a novella coming out for World Book Day, the 4th of March 2021. Obviously, I got it beforehand, I read it, it's great, it's fantastic. In this one, Valkyrie, right, look. In this one, our protagonist is 15. So if you have read some of the Skulduggery books but not all of them, and you aren't sure as to whether you can read this one, check how old she is in your book. If she's 16, you can read this. If she's 15, wait till you read the next one. It doesn't match up in the series, it doesn't now go in at the end where we're at the moment, because she's like my age, maybe a little older, so yeah. It was great, I loved it. Then coming in at 368 pages, I reread Skulduggery Pleasant. There's a reread going on at the moment, kind of across the months, that I'm gonna link down below. And yeah, combined with the fact that I read Apocalypse Kings, I just kind of had to, so. I read it, I loved it, we already knew that. You guys know, I have a whole video on it. An entire video. Then the last book that I finished in full, coming in at 278 pages, is Flash Forward by Rose Eveleth. I listened to her podcast, Flash Forward, same name. It's fantastic. I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it. All the podcasts I listen to apart from 404 are science non-fiction. I adore this one so much, and so of course when I saw this book on NetGalley I had to pick it up. I will say, I'm filming this on Saturday. I haven't actually finished it yet. I'm going to. Like, if it kills me, I'm finishing this book before the end of the month. So I don't really want to give too much of like a review right now, because obviously I haven't actually read it. But it's got comics talking about like future scenarios, intermingled with Rose having done research about these scenarios and writing that all in, and so far I'm very much enjoying it. I will have finished it. Fall of Giants by Ken Follett is one that I was going to try and get part the way through this month, and I read 117 pages of this month. I've actually ended up tabbing it up in the same way as I have done War and Peace, and I'm enjoying it a lot more now that I'm taking it in these small sections. And then lastly, me and Olivia got through, at least in my edition, 139 pages of War and Peace. Now again, it's Saturday. I haven't read the 2 chapters for today, I haven't read the 2 chapters for tomorrow. So currently I'm not that far through, but I will be. So we're now into book 4. There's been a cliffhanger in book 4 that is fantastic. Loving it. And just being able to discuss this with Olivia, I say this every time, but being able to discuss this with her is making this so much better. It's so much fun, which I did not expect from War and Peace. So thank you, Olivia. And I'm not holding them all up again because I did that for the thumbnail and it's too fucking big. But I read in total, as long as I of course read my 4 chapters of War and Peace and finish off Flash Forward, in total I read 3,674 pages this month. My little goal in my bullet journal was to at least hit 1,600. So I think I smashed that. What did you read in February? Did you go a bit fucking mad like I did and read loads of books? Or because it is the shortest month in the year, did you read less? Let me know down in the comments below, and also let me know if you've read any of these. What did you think of them? Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!